This is one of those movies that me watching it was decades in the making. This is a movie I remembered from the video store years that I always saw on the shelf and I just never rented. I remember it being on cable. I remember it being talked about. I think I vaguely remember when it came out. And from 1982, this is Homework, starring Joan Collins, asterisk. This is, it was produced by Max Rosenberg. I was going to say Milton Subotsky. That was his partner. Produced by Max Rosenberg, who was one of the guys behind Amicus films in the 70s. So he had worked with Joan Collins before on the original Tales from the Crypt movie. And Amicus was known, if you don't know, they were like I don't want to say the poor man's Hammer because I really liked Amicus. Amicus did Hammer-like movies, but they did a lot of anthology movies. So they did Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror and Asylum and all kinds of stuff like that. And Dr. Terror's House of Horrors and things. And it was really bizarre for me to see that the guy who made those British horror movies did this teen sex comedy from the 80s. What the movie is, and I even have this on tape. I should have grabbed the box. This is a movie I bought on tape used years ago when a video store was getting rid of it. I still hadn't watched it until this release came out from Unearthed Classics on Blu-ray. And Joan Collins, Michael Morgan, Lee Purcell, who you may recognize if you don't know the name, Carrie Snodgrass, Wings Hauser is in this film, Mel Wells, who played Mr. Mushnick in the original Little Shop of Horrors, and a very brief role for Betty Thomas, who went on to be on Hill Street Blues and then went on to a really successful career directing, I think, mostly comedies in Hollywood. And it's presented in mono or stereo. It has English subtitles as well as English SDH subtitles. And boy, is this movie not what it's advertised to be. Ostensibly, this film looks like it's another Private Lessons. This movie looks like it's about a young guy who's looking to score, and he hooks up with an older woman who's the parent of one of his friends, the mother of one of his friends, and it's this Mrs. Robinson kind of action going on, and that's not what this movie is. I don't know what this movie was shot to be. I would love to see the original shooting script for this movie. Apparently this was a first-time director, and it's interesting in one of the supplements, I have to keep looking at his name, Rosenberg. I keep wanting to say Subotsky. Rosenberg says he was a first-time director and he did a bad job, and I agree. This is not a good film. This might be a nostalgic film for people. This might be a film that's very, satisfies your curiosity. It could work for some people like 70s movies work for me, or early 80s movies where you just love the look and the aesthetic of the time period. It may work for you there, but as a movie, this was awful. I thought it's like super dull. The scenes like go nowhere. The characters are flat. It's not funny. The relationship between the kid and Joan Collins that is teased at like in the trailers and on the poster art is one scene. Joan Collins is barely in the movie. The basic story is you get this young kid, this young blonde kid in high school. He's super, his hormones are raging. He's looking to score. He's never been with a woman. His friends are talking about it. They're doing the Porky's thing. They're peeping through the peephole in the locker room and all that. And he can't get anywhere. At the same time, he and his friends are trying to form a band and play in this big talent show because that's going to lead them to stardom. They believe that this one first performance they ever give publicly at a school talent competition is going to get them a record deal or something like that, which seems a little weird, but I guess it's the hope and excitement of youth that makes sense. But in the context of the movie, like they start to play a song and the kid is like, "That's amazing." The song's terrible. "We're going to be the next Lennon and McCartney." You're not. The song's terrible. And the music in it I thought was actually also not very good. So it goes back and forth between like this kid is doing something and then he has some kind of fantasy sequence where suddenly somebody who's clearly not him, like a body double, is surrounded like busty babes who are taking their clothes off and getting naked, and it's just really weird. It feels like it was shot later. And then you have the scenes with Joan Collins, which are very, very few. It's really like she can't have worked on this movie for very long. There's a scene where she's talking to her husband in their bedroom and she's like getting dressed or getting ready during the day for something, and it's like he's in the other room. You only hear his dubbed voice, and then all of a sudden like the frame freezes and you get the blur, and then it's different actors supposed to be these characters in the 50s, and they sort of are fumbling around and getting a little bit naked and stuff. It feels really like post-production tampered with. And then ultimately, you get to the scene where Joan Collins seduces the boy, which is really barely even a scene, and it cuts to two clear body doubles like rolling around on a pool table for a minute, and then the kid is like leaving the house, adjusting his shirt collar, smiling, and then that's it. Like this whole thing that builds up to this movie is barely even a factor in a movie. It's really much more about these kids trying to make it big, and some side stories where one of the girls in the band idolizes Wings Hauser, who I guess is supposed to be a big rock and roll star. It's never 100% clear, and she gets sort of taken advantage of by him, and there's some kind of STD subplot. It's just like, it's a total mess. It's all over the place. The best parts are when the kid is like wandering Hollywood. One of the kids is wandering like sort of sleazy Hollywood Boulevard in the early 80s, 1981 probably when they shot this, or when you see a little bit of like the Egyptian theater and some original posters and marquees and stuff. For me, that was the best part of it. I thought this was really not good. This is like, for me, like sub Crown International. Like, I loved American International. Crown International always was like way less than, was like, to me, like 10 steps down from AIP. And what they made was just not very good. Like, even in their trailers, you're like, this movie looks not very good. So I would not recommend this movie at all unless you're a fan of it, or unless you want to see all of those May December romance movies from the 80s, because you had Private Lessons, you had They're Playing with Fire, you had this, and there are probably others I'm not thinking of right now. There are elements of other movies in this that's got the Private Lessons vibe, a tiny amount, but not really. It's got the Porky's vibe a little bit, but not really. Really, it feels like it was this coming of age, maybe drama that was made about these kids trying to form a band, and they really shoehorned in this shot later nudity and stuff, because it really feels like it's from a different movie altogether. There is nudity here and there throughout the movie. It's usually gratuitous, and it's really weird. It's a really weird vibe to this film. The transfer is pretty good on the Blu-ray. Sometimes there's not a lot of subtlety in the contrast gradation, if that makes any sense. Sometimes things are just a little darker than they should be, not the overall image, but like the dark areas don't, it seems like there should be more there. The sound, very good sound. The extras are an interview with producer Max Rosenberg. It's 27 minutes. It's 4:3 SD that came from an earlier DVD release of this. I was worried that this was going to be, like, because I watched this movie and I'm like, I need an explanation. Like, how did this come to be? Why is this the way it is? This movie I've heard about for years and is just like a total mess. Apparently Joan Collins like made a big to-do about this movie when it came out, or just before it came out, and she got in the press and was bad-mouthing the movie, saying they want me to do all this nudity and all this, which apparently was in the script. And after the fact, she was mad because some of the poster art like put her head on another body, and just a total disaster. So I was afraid that the extras would be just like a career-spanning interview with Rosenberg that didn't talk about this movie. It is career-spanning, but it talks predominantly about this movie. It's a really good extra, and it's fascinating how he talks about how the movie was made, how it was funded, how it was scripted, how it was shot and cut, all this stuff about Collins and its reception. And he's like brutally honest about saying he thinks it's not a very good movie, which is, you don't put that on the box cover, but it's interesting to see that looking back. And really, really solid extra. I'm very glad that's on here. There's a promotional gallery that's 1.5 minutes long that's set to a song from the film. And then there are trailers for Homework, which is a horrible quality but good sound, strangely. And again, it misrepresents the movie totally as being another Private Lessons. Other movies that Unearthed Classics are putting out: Full Body Massage, Tokyo Decadence, and Nightwish. And if you want to see the packaging, so this is the box cover. That was the VHS cover. That was the poster. It really makes you think that's what the movie's about, and it is really one scene that's not much of anything. And the back has some various shots from the film. It's a slipcase edition, which means the slipcase slips to reveal pretty much the same thing. You crack it open, and so I forgot to mention. So when I got this before I watched the movie, I'm looking at this. I'm like, what is all this? What is all that stuff on there? What does that mean? All these weird logos. Are these like bands in the movie or something? The best moment in this film, the best sequence, is a classroom scene where the students are watching a VD educational film. And it goes on for a while. And the menu on this Blu-ray and the disc surface printing are all these phrases for venereal disease that hit the screen. And the menu is that sequence from the film. So it's, boy, was this weird. I mean, you may love this film. This may be a film you remember seeing when you were a kid or a teenager or an adolescent or whatever, that you rented or that you saw on cable or whatever. If that's the case, and you watch it again, let me know what you think, because I was like really disappointed in this. I'm glad that this is out there. I will always say that. For fans, you've got a really nice edition of Homework now with some really cool extras that upgrade the old DVD apparently. It's worth a watch if you're interested in that whole teen sex comedy genre, if you're interested in that whole realm of movies that would never get made today, or if you just want to compare this to the other ones that came out. Unearthed Classics does that for you now with the Blu-ray edition of Homework.